Good morning everyone, how is it going today? Welcome to my channel, my name is Alejandro and we're here to talk about web development and a little bit about data science as well because it has become popular culture already. Today we're going to be building a JavaScript map and it's going to be an interactive map and we're going to be building it with vanilla JavaScript, which means that we will not be using any frameworks such as React or Angular, and we're going to be making it very customizable. Okay, so this is the end result that you see right here. As you can see, we have several markers right here, and you will be able to add as many as you want as long as you have the coordinates. Every marker you can assign a pop-up to it, and every marker can have a different pop-up. In this example, it's just the same one, but every marker can have a different pop-up. We're going to be using a library called leaflet.js, which is a free library, and we're going to be using OpenStreetMap as our map provider. Okay, so that's going to be a free map, so you won't have to worry about paying Google API, etc. The map is also pretty customizable, as you can see, because here we have a different skin. I just chose a watercolor skin, but you can choose any different design that you want, or just a very sober traditional map style. It's also possible. Okay. Last but not least, there is also the possibility of adding clusters to your map. And this is what we're going to be seeing. So when you zoom out, if there are many markers that are at the same place, we're going to be able to cluster them in just one icon that shows the amount, the number of markers that are in that position. And by clicking on it, we're going to zoom into the markers. Okay, so as you can see as well, this is a div, and we're going to be able to just embed it wherever you want, okay? Since this is a div, you can also use it as a full screen map, or you can use it as a very simple embedded map at some point in your website. Okay, so let's get right into it. All right. So for this project, I'm going to be building it in Code Sandbox because it's pretty much just a front-end project. If you're not familiar with Code Sandbox, I just really recommend it for your front-end project, but I'm going to be explaining the differences between Code Sandbox and your local environment along the way, okay? So that you can follow either in Code Sandbox or in your local environment with your machine. Okay, so there we go. So let's just take a look at the file folder structure right here. So we have our index.html, which is the page that in the template that's being loaded. Here we have our HTML file, and we have a div called app. Okay, and then we're importing our index.js here at the bottom. After that, if we go see our index.html, it's actually replacing the content inside the app element with this right here. And this is exactly why we see this right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to replace it with hello world. How are you? And here we have hello world that's being loaded. Then we're also importing styles.css inside our JavaScript file. And styles.css has a font family sans serif, and that's all we got. Okay, so it's a very simple folder structure, and let's get right into it to start building our application. Okay, how does that look? So there we go. As I mentioned before, we're going to be using leaflet.js, which is a free library. And if you feel like it, you can also check out their documentation. They have a very good and very detailed documentation. But for now, let's just code it right ourselves, okay? So first of all, I'm not going to be using this part right here. And right here, this one right here, I am going to rename it to map, okay? So this div is going to be map. And right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install Leaflet first, okay? Here, my dependency list is pretty much the same as doing npm install, okay? So if I look here for Leaflet, it's pretty much just the same as doing npm install Leaflet, okay? So as you can see, I am working with the version 1.9.3, but I mean, hopefully this will be, you won't have any problems if you're loading another version, okay? A newer version. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to import our Leaflet library. So what we're going to do is we're going to do import everything as L from Leaflet. There you go. And now we can use L as our Leaflet element. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is we have to initialize the map. Okay, and how do we initialize it? So we have to create our variable that's going to be map. And the map is going to be an instance of L. And we're going to call it, map, like this. And right here, this method right here, what it does, it requires you to tell it which HTML element is going to be filled with your map, okay? And the HTML element that we want filled with our map is the one that we named right here. So we're going to pass the ID of this one right here, right there, okay? So the ID of this div is map. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in right here, it's going to be map. And then just add another method right here that's called setView. SetView to tell it where we want the map to be centered at the beginning. So I'm just going to say it's going to be in London, and the coordinates for London and are 51.505 like Arctic monkeys and negative 0.09. And the second argument that takes is the zoom that we want this to have, and we're going to set it to 13 so that we have a city view. If you want to know a little bit more about the zoom levels that you have, you can just Google leaflet zooms, and here you have leaflet zoom levels. Basically, the higher it is, the closer it is to the city, and the lower it is, the closer it is to the world view, okay? So I encourage you to test the zoom levels if you want to try it out for yourself, okay? So now that we have initialized the map, the second thing we have to do is we have to add a map layer to it, okay? This means that we already have our map, but we have to add our map layer to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to call leaflet again, and we're going to say tile layer, like this. And we're going to say which tile layer we want to load here. Here we want to load our map provider, okay? And the map provider that we're going to be using is OpenStreetMap because it's free. And so you just have to load it like this right here. And then tile layer also takes a second argument, which are the parameters that you want to add to your map, okay? And the params, there are many, but I'm just going to set it maximum zoom level to 19 so that people don't go like very, very deep into our zoom. And also it's convenient to add an attribution part to it. This attribution part is basically what you see right here. There you go. Let me just zoom in. I cannot zoom in right here. So it's basically this part right here, okay? So, I mean, when you use OpenStreetMap, you kind of have to attribute it to OpenStreetMap, okay? So I'm just going to add this part right here. There you go. So my attribution is going to be copy OpenStreetMap. There you go. Now you have it, and once we have already created our layer, okay? But now we have to actually add it to our map. So to do that, we are going to use another method that's called add_to, and it just takes as an argument the actual map element that we have just created. and it is map as we defined it up here. Okay, so now if I save and I refresh, as you can see, we have some problems going on right here. The map is crazy for some reason, and also like it's like all over the place, and we don't seem to see an actual size of the map. Okay, when you see this problem, it basically means that you are having problems with your CSS. Okay, so as you can see, we have imported the JavaScript part of Leaflet, but we haven't imported the CSS part of Leaflet. So what we're going to do to fix this is we're going to go to their tutorials or the docs, whatever, and we're going to add their CSS. Okay, so include the CSS from Leaflet in the head section of your document. I am going to do it like this, but if you are using npm, what you can do is just do something like this: import leaflet, and then just import the CSS from here. If I'm not mistaken, I don't remember, you might want to check it in your node modules directory, but if I am not mistaken, it's something like leaflet dist and then leaflet.css, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not sure about it. I'm just gonna, all right, let's try it like this and let's see how it works. Okay, now we have another problem. The other problem that we have is that our div, Leaflet pretty much just fills in our div with the map, but it doesn't tell the div what size it has to be. Okay, so the problem that we see right now is that we don't see anything, and that is because our div has a height of 0. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to set a height to 300 pixels. And there you go. So now we have our height of 300 pixels and our map is working because apparently this part right here actually worked. As you can see, if I remove leaflet.css, this is going to become crazy. Okay, so this is what you do. This, just to make this clear, this right here, this line right here only works because I am using leaflet from npm. Okay, this right here calls the leaflet.css that's actually inside node modules leaflet dist leaflet css. Okay, so this only works because I'm using npm. If you are not using npm, you're going to have to come right here to index.html and add your CSS right here. And as you can see, it works again. Okay, but since I am using npm, I'm not going to add this one right here, and I am going to just add it from here. There you go. So here we have our map seems to be working correctly, and we already have a working map in just a few lines. We just initialized our map and we added the tile layer. So that's pretty good. Let's see, what do we want to do afterwards? Let's add the markers. Okay, add markers. So to add the markers, what we're going to do is we're also following just the documentation, but what we're going to do to add the markers is pretty much you just set a new marker, you call it add marker like that, and you're going to set it equal to L from leaflet marker, and this marker takes several arguments, but the first one is basically just its position. Okay, so I'm just going to set it somewhere in London, 51.5 and minus 0.08. There you go. And then the other argument, that's pretty much all that we need. And then once that you have your marker that has been created, you just as you did with the layer, you add to map like this. And then, as you can see, if I save this right here and I refresh this page right here, my marker for some reason does not have the icon. I suppose because the icon actually comes from this part right here. So let's see if I use this one, does it work? For some reason my marker is not loading correctly. I'm not sure why. Alright, give me a couple of seconds. I'm just going to figure out why this marker is not loading. Alright, so I think I got why it wasn't working actually. The problem is that we're importing Leaflet from up here, and apparently the icon is only loaded if we imported it from the actual CDN, right? So the icon is not here, but if we import it from here, but I don't know, it's just some kind of strange problem. But this is pretty useful actually, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to load your own icon, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to be using this icon right here from Flat Icons. So I just loaded Flat Icon and I just opened whichever icon I wanted. I'm going to be using this one. And I mean, you would usually download it to your own file, to your own folder, and you would load it from there. But I'm just like, because I'm lazy, I'm just going to copy the address from here, and I am going to paste it right here. All right, so we're not going to be using this one. We're going to stick to npm version like that. And now we're going to, as you can see, we don't have the marker, but what we're going to do is we're going to initialize a new marker, a new icon, okay, for this marker. I'm going to call it custom icon, and it's going to be a leaflet element. I'm going to call, you call leaflet and then you call an icon. And this method creates an icon and it takes several parameters, okay? So the first one is the icon URL. And right here you just paste the URL of your icon. As I just copied it, I'm just going to paste it right here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass that one right here as a parameter for my new marker. So right here, I'm going to add parameters right here, and I'm going to say icon, and the icon is going to be custom icon, okay, like that. All right, so now our icon is loading, as you can see. The only problem is that it's huge, all right? So we probably don't want our icon to be this big. So what we are going to do is we're going to add a new parameter here to my icon, and I'm going to call it icon size. And this one right here takes just pretty much the size of the icon in pixels, so I'm going to set it to 38 times 38. So there you go. Now you have this pretty little icon that's 38 pixels by 38 pixels. Okay, and that's how it works if you want to create your custom icon. I'm just going to add it right here, my custom icon. There you go. So now we saw how to add markers. Let's add a couple more. All right, how about we add two more. I'm used to VS Code, so all right, so there you go. I'm going to move this one just a little bit to the side and a little bit down, a little bit up, and this one a little bit down. So there you go. So now you have your three markers right here, and there you go. All right, so now you have your markers, but what are we going to do right now? Let's see, how about we create a cluster for them, okay? So right now you can see that we have our map that's working pretty good. Actually, you know what, I'm going to show you so that you see it like full screen. I'm just going to set this one to 100 viewport height, so that way you can see the map all the way here. Okay, there you go. So there you have it. We have our three markers right here, and what we're going to do right now is we're going to create a cluster for this, okay? And now there was another question: how do we create these clusters All right, because so far, if we move too far away, it's not working correctly because we're seeing just a bunch of clustered together, a bunch of markers together, and we don't really see what's in there. So we're going to replace this with a div that is going to display the number of markers that are in that position. And then when we click on that div, it's going to zoom in and show us all the markers. All right, so that's how it works. And to do this, what we're going to do is we're actually going to use a new dependency that's actually a plugin for Leaflet, and it's called Leaflet Marker Cluster. There you go, and you can find it. It's on GitHub. It's this one right here, and as you can see, it works pretty good. If you want, you can follow the instructions right here, or let's jump right into the code and I can show you how it works. Okay. So far, in case you haven't noticed, Leaflet works with layers. Okay, so first we created our map element, and then to that element we have added layers. Okay, so first we created our tile layer, which is the map itself that we have added to our map element, and we have added it on top of the map element as a layer. Okay, then every marker that we're creating is sort of a layer on top of that. Okay, so what the cluster plugin does is that it creates a new layer on top of that marker, on top of that map, and then it's on top of this marker cluster layer that you add your markers, and then all the markers that are inside this layer are going to be clustered together when they're close, and then shown separately when they're dispersed. Okay, so let's create this cluster layer. Okay, so to create a cluster layer, the first thing that you need to do is install this Leaflet Marker Cluster dependency, and to do this you can just do Leaflet Marker Cluster. As I told you before, when I search for dependencies right here, it's pretty much as though you were importing them, installing them with npm. So what I did is pretty much equivalent to doing npm install Leaflet Marker Cluster, and I'm working with version 1.5.3 and Leaflet is 1.9.3. Now that I have installed it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import it right here. I'm going to import Leaflet Marker Cluster. There you go. And this right here is going to extend this L element right here. And it's going to give me access to a new part of it, to a new method in this element. And it's going to be Marker Cluster Group. There you go. And basically this pretty much allows us to create this new layer that is going to be the marker cluster group, where we're going to put our markers. So I'm going to create that layer. I'm going to call it my cluster layer. Let's equal to that. And this one right here actually takes in some arguments. But first of all, we're having a problem right here, and I want to show you why this is not working. Because you might run into some of these problems here if you're using a npm and a bundler. Okay, so for some reason, the cluster plugin does add the marker cluster group function, a method, to the L element. But the problem is that sometimes it doesn't recognize the actual L element from Leaflet, and it just creates a new one. So to access that new one, you would actually have to access it through window.l.markerCluster, and as you can see now, we don't have an error. I think this is a bug from the plugin, and I hope it's fixed soon. But another way to look at it is that if you do console log and you check whether window.l equals L, then you're going to see that it actually, at least in my case, it prints false, which means that window.l and L are not the same thing. So yeah, if you were having that problem, just add window in front of the L for marker cluster group, and you will be fine. Okay. All right, so let's continue creating our cluster layer. This function actually takes in several arguments, but the one that we're going to use right here is we're going to add a function that creates the icon that we're going to see when we have a cluster, okay? So this argument, this parameter is called icon create function. There you go. And as the name suggests, it takes in a function. And the function takes in one argument, which is cluster, okay? And this cluster is actually the cluster of your markers, okay? And this function, what it does is it has to return your div, okay? So let's see. Let's add return l.div icon, because we're going to create an icon for this. And inside this div icon, we're going to add some HTML, and the HTML is going to be a very simple div, okay? Div, and we're going to give it a class so that we can actually modify it later. And the class is going to be cluster div, like that. Now let's close our div like this. There you go. And let's add something inside here. And inside here, what we're going to do is going to add the cluster dot get child count, which basically what it does is it returns the number of markers inside that cluster, okay? So that way, what we're going to see right here when we see the cluster, we're going to see a div with a class of cluster div, and the content of that div is going to be the child count, the number of markers that are inside it, okay? So that's how this goes. So we have already created our cluster layer. What we're gonna have to do right now is we're going to add these markers right here, but instead of adding them directly to the map, what we're going to do is we're going to add them to our layer, to our cluster layer, okay? So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take all of this and I'm going to add them I'm going to create them after the cluster layer down here. There you go. And I'm not going to add them to the map like this. Like that. There you go. There you go. And actually, I mean, this is ridiculous. Why did we have different names for different the same name for different elements? So now we have different markers, and I'm just going to actually use const instead of var. There you go. So now we have our 3 different markers, each of them using our custom icon, but we haven't included them in our layer. So what we're going to do is we're going to add them on top of our cluster layer. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to call our cluster layer. And basically, we're just going to say add layer on top of it. And we're going to add a layer and we're going to add each marker as a layer to it. So I'm going to add marker 1. There you go. And then if I refresh, I should actually see it over there. What is going on right here? My cluster layer at cluster layer at layer. My cluster layer. What is going on right here? Marker 2 is assigned. Console is not working. What is going on right here? Oh yeah, sure. Actually, I mean, we have successfully added this marker to our cluster layer, but the problem is that the layer is not yet added, is not being added yet to our actual map, right? So what we're gonna want to do in the end, after we have added our markers, we're going to call our map and we're going to add the layer, which is going to be our cluster layer. There you go. And now if I save this, now we have our marker that we have added to the cluster layer. And ideally, we would want to do the same thing for our marker 2 and our marker 3. And there you have it. now we have our 3 markers working correctly. And if we zoom out, you can see that we have a div with the number 3 in there, okay? So that is pretty convenient. We already have a div element which displays the number of items that we have. And if we click on it, we see the actual 3 markers over there. But I mean, of course, that is pretty ugly. So what we would ideally want to do is actually like style it so that it actually is fun to see, right? I mean, this obviously is pretty ugly. So remember that we added the cluster div class for that one, like this, not like that, like this. There you go. So what we're going to do is we're just going to restyle this right there. So let's add a background color, background color to white. Why not? Let's set its height to 3 rem and its width, to 3 rem too. Let's add a border radius to 50% so that we see an actual circle, and let's add a very cute box shadow of let's set it to the center, 0 pixels and 4 pixels. There you go. Let's see how that looks like. There you go. It's looking pretty good. The problem right now is that we're actually seeing it, I mean, it's displayed, I mean, it's a little bit not where we want it to be. We want it to be actually on top of the cluster, and it's, I mean, only its upper corner is in the center. So what we're going to do to fix this thing right here is pretty much we're going to transform and we're going to translate it. We're going to say minus 50% and minus 50%. There you go. And now if we save this, it should be there. The problem is that our number 3 is very small over there. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to actually center it. I'm just going to use display flex and center it like this. Then what are we going to do? Let's add a font size of 1.5 rem for that 3. And let's set its font weight to bold so that it's a little bit easier to look at it. There you go. So now we have our number 3 and it's looking pretty good. But remember that we can just like modify this div with our class that we have just added right here. Okay, so I mean, that hopefully gives you a lot of freedom to modify your cluster divs. And also remember that you can add as many cluster layers as you wish so that markers can cluster together independently. So if you have, I don't know, some markers for members of a community or for events or something, and you want them to cluster together and not like in the same cluster, you can just add different cluster layers for those and add the markers separately. Okay, now this is very a little dirty, because I mean you wouldn't actually do this like in real life. You would actually call this into an array and then loop through the array and then create your markers, but that's how it works. Okay, I mean, this is just to show you how it works. I'm just going to show you pretty quick as well how you add pop-ups to your markers, and this works pretty much like this. To a marker element, I mean, like here we have our marker number 1, and to the marker number 1 we're going to add marker 1. We're going to add a method. We're going to run a method that's called bind popup, like that, and right here it basically just takes any HTML that you want. Okay, I'm going to add an h3 like this. There you go. I'm going to say I am a pop-up. There you go. And as you can see, this right here has created a pop-up in one of these. Which one is it? It's this one. Okay. As you can see, this is pretty much entirely customizable as well, because I just added whatever HTML right here and it was loaded inside my pop-up. And as you can see, you can add different pop-ups to different markers. So I am pop-up for marker 2. There you go. And then if I reload, then I have my pop-up for marker 2, and this is my pop-up for marker 1. There you go. All right. So now that we have seen how to create our map, how to add our cluster groups, how to add our pop-ups, and how to actually change their icons, what we can do now is I'm going to show you how to modify this style of the actual map, okay? So far we're actually just using a very simple tile layer at markers to cluster. There you go. So right now we're actually using a very simple tile layer that comes from OpenStreetMap, and it's actually very convenient if you want your map to be pretty sober. But the idea is that if you want your map to be a little bit more different, you can come right here and look for leaflet skins, something like that, and you will find that something called leaflet provider, okay? And it basically just allows you to choose many different skins, and some of them are like paid for, some of them are free. What I recommend is that you test them and see which one is free and which one works for you, okay? To actually use it, what I like to do is I want to go to GitHub right here, and here you have the example of how to use this thing, okay? You can either include it with a script, or you can install it with npm, which is what I'm going to do myself. And to install it, you just add npm install leaflet providers, like this one. And now I have installed leaflet providers. And let import leaflet providers, like that. There you go. And now I am getting access to a new element in my L thing, in my L object, and here I can add another tile layer like this one. And instead of just opening this one right here, I'm gonna be able to add a provider to it like this. There you go. And inside the provider, I can just run whichever map I want, okay? Here you have the example, and here you have the different maps actually work differently. So I really recommend that you take a quick look at this before you choose which skin you want to use. I'm just going to use a very simple one, which is free, but some of them do require an API key, okay? So this is to include them. As you see, what I did is tile layer, provider, then you say the name of your map. Sometimes you require an API key, sometimes you don't. I am just going to use a free one, which is this one, same in watercolor. And there you go. And I'm just going to add it right here like that. Same in watercolor, which is basically same in watercolor. It must be somewhere around here. I cannot find it, but I mean, once you find one that you like, you can just check it. It's JWG. So you come right here. How does that one goes? All right, so JWG maps. In order to use JWG maps, you must register. Once registered, etc. So you will get an access token. Okay. So I mean, depending on which one you choose, you might want to come here to your documentation and check what are the requirements for that actual skin. I'm just going to use this free one, which is the watercolor one. I'm going to paste it over there, and the thing is that I have actually created my tile layer, but this one right here is going to replace this one right here. So what I want to do is I'm going to remove this one from the map right here, and I'm just going to add this one instead. So add to map. There you go. And if I save, now I have my watercolor skin working, okay? And that's pretty much how it works. Now you have your cluster, now you have your very sophisticated skin and style for your map. You have different pop-ups for different markers. You also learned how to change the icon of your markers. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how to create maps for this. I mean, I could go all the way and actually just add the, like, just as I showed you before, but I mean, I think this is pretty clear already. And as I mentioned before, this is completely customizable. You can just tweak pretty much all the parameters that I showed you and just like center it somewhere else with a different zoom, and you can set it to default to Europe or to the United States, etc. There you go. What else? Yeah, so as I was showing you, this actually comes, all of it is inside this div, which is div ID map. So if you want to add this div, like if you want to set it to full screen, like I did, you can just set it to 100 viewport height. But if you want to include it just in a section of your website, you can just do that as well. After all, it's just a div. And it's all in the JavaScript. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of videos, and like the video, of course, that helps me a lot for the YouTube algorithm. And yeah, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.